today, as you know, we're in the midst of a new kind of an evolution and revolution where information technology is increasingly integrated with two previously separate areas, both industry and energy. These are the words of Pete da Silva, CEO of the South African high technology firm Jasco. He joins us now. Pete, thanks so much for your time. Whereas 10 years ago, everybody was looking to mobile phone operators to change the world, it seems as though attention now is increasingly falling on the energy companies and the electricity providers.
Absolutely, I'm so excited about this. If we go back to the early 90s, we had one operator in the telco space, which was Telkom, and government took that leap, a big leap, to say, how do we take that industry and make it tenfold? And they did that by introducing mobility, which grew, and we know what's happened to mobility, or what mobility's brought to Southern Africa. I predict we're at the same departure point for energy. Governments made the bold step to bring in what we call the IPPs, or independent power producers, which are the Vodacoms and MTNs and Cell Cs of the energy sector. And I think that's the next growth for the next 20 years.
IPPs would say to you, absolutely, in more liberal environments that could create the kind of revolution you're talking about. But in highly regulated environments where you've got an Eskom as a monopoly player, where people are not agreeing on refit tariffs for investors, it could be a long way away.
I said there's change. I didn't say it was easy. You know, I was involved in the telco sector during this change, and it was a very difficult birth. I remind you, it took 3 years to issue the Cell C license for the same reasons. I just hope we've paid our school fees and we can do this a lot faster. But you're right. We got to think. Eskom, I equate to Telkom in totally different industries. You know what I like about the management of Eskom? I think they've realized they cannot do it alone, and they're starting to embrace private sector involvement in generating the future energy.
Returns, because at its peak, and some would argue ICT is still at its peak, we were seeing returns of over 15, 16, 17%, irrespective of changing market conditions. Is that the kinds of investment potential that exists in the energy space? It
could be, but I come back to the issue of the regulated environment. It depends on the renewable energy feed-in tariff, for instance. That's for renewable, but you know, conventional feed-in tariffs per se. You can either allow an industry to develop. And, you know, South Africa, we're not leaders. We can learn from the good, the bad, and the ugly that's happened around the world. I'm not in total agreement the way we've gone, but I must say I congratulate government for making a decision and taking the first step. It may not be the best one, but at least we made a move by putting in some competitive bidding out there.
Now, we talk about IPPs as the new kind of industry operators, but they're still going to have to do business with these big monoliths called government that move so slowly, particularly the municipalities that have capacity issues, bureaucratic issues, and that could really be a huge hindrance to success.
Yeah, when you have an hindrance to success, you have an opportunity. And as Jasco playing in this field, this is where we see it. You know, we love being in this space. We don't want to be in the first world environment where all these services are there. We want to take these barriers away. So yes, we got to generate new capacity. The demand that people demand is much higher than what Eskom at this point can deliver. But that's only at the generation side of it. Imagine the distribution. You've mentioned yourself municipalities. There's absolute opportunity here for innovative companies to get involved and help with that, and at the same time generate new industry, generate new workload. Just a renewable business. You know, we have the most solar days per annum, but we're lagging in terms of the deployment of that.
What about the S word? Skills, because people say when you start talking about local content, which is firmly entrenched in IPAP, for instance, we want to see new manufacturing concerns arising out of these key areas of economic change. Where are the people to drive that? You've
got to bring in know-how transfer. We as Jasco have done it, for instance, in our cable manufacture. We got world leaders out of South Korea. We've given them equity, and their responsibility is the know-how and to entrench that know-how. That's the only way we can achieve it. At the same time, we've got to start at the bottom rung of the ladder in terms of education, education, education. But if we only wait for the theoretical and for our future engineers to come out, I'm sorry to say we'll be waiting for too long.
And what sort of convergence are we likely to see? Because ICT is still here to stay. A lot of industry requires new technological innovations for efficiency. Energy in as much as we're going to be relying on the earth and fossil fuels and the sun and all sorts of other things, in those distribution lines, we're going to have to be using new forms of technology. How are we going to see some of these industries converge?
We're talking about smart grids in the energy. Now, in the telco space, we've been talking about smart grids for 15 years. So there's a lot of know-how, information transfer. We've got to use that network efficiently. And you know, it's like the bandwidth. You want to use bandwidth in telecoms when you want it, right then, right now, and when you don't need it, you want to give it back. I see the same thing coming in energy, but you've got to deploy smart grids. I mean, we're in the infancy of that, but that will come.
What about costings? I mean, what is it going to cost potential new investors coming into this market?
A lot of money, and that's why government needs to ensure that we have longevity. In other words, you got to coerce these investors to come in, set up shops, set up factories, set up, not rent a pot plant and rent an office somewhere, and when the project's gone, they pack up and go. You've got to incite them to stay, and that means you've got to have long-term contracts available.
Are we thinking Pan-African? Because although we do need our own solutions to energy security issues in South Africa, a lot of the regional economies rely on what we're able to do. Eskom is also providing electricity to so many other SADC states, as far as beyond the Democratic Republic of Congo, for instance.
We have to think Pan-African, or at least SADC. We have to, otherwise we will fail. If you just look to the north of us and standing on the tip of Africa, you've got oceans on the south, you've got it on the east, you've got it on the west. So in other words, you've got wind all along there. You've got 360 days of sun a year. You've got two major rivers, what is it? Well, the two major rivers that Zambezi, thank you, and the Congolese, or the Congo River, that can produce massive amounts of kilowatts out there. You know, we're sitting on a pile of coal. A lot of people will shoot me for saying that, but it's an energy source anyway. And if we can put all of that together, have a super grid in SADC, that's it.
Okay, well, it's been great having you, and we wish you well in your endeavours. He's Pete da Silva, who is CEO of Jasco, talking to us about how important it is to start thinking beyond the so-called ICT revolution and start looking at the energy revolution and the convergence of industries across the board.